Thank you for joining us. Today we are here courtesy of a product management session by Jackie Bavaro. Jackie has over 15 years of product management experience, most recently as the head of product management at Asana. During her tenure, she says she grew the PM team to over 20 people. She also helped Asana go from $0 to more than $100 million in annual recurring revenue. I feel like snapping to that. She also launched Asana's Associate Product Management program. So Jackie has worked as a PM for Google and Microsoft before, as well as in a diverse set of PM roles: consumer, B2B, platform, mobile, and growth. She has been a manager and a manager of managers. And I think, at least for me, the most exciting is that she is also a co author of two books. Hopefully, she'll tell us more about that. Her first book, Cracking the PM Interview, has been credited with helping to level the playing field for the PM talent. So I'll tell you, like, this hour will definitely be, one that you'd love that you set aside the hour to be with us. So, Jackie, over to you. Thank you so much for being with us. Take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, and thanks for sharing my Twitter handle, because I got into a little competition with someone who's trying to beat me to 10,000 followers. So if any of you wanted to follow me and help me win, I would love that. But yeah, so I was going to go into some topics about what a PM is and how to succeed as a PM, and talk about some of the things that I learned. I want to talk a little bit about what a product manager is. So there's a lot of different things that people say about what a product manager might be. So I've got kind of a word cloud here of different things you might hear. You might hear they're the advocate for the customer. They're like a mini CEO. And I think a lot of these words have a lot of truth to them. But when I think about product management, what I really think about is the product triad. So I think of the PM works closely with an engineering lead and a designer in a partnership to create great products. So the engineering lead is responsible for solving the problem technically. The designer is responsible for solving the problem from the user experience perspective. And the product manager is the person who is responsible for deciding which problem should we solve. So it's a really important and impactful role, because on a team, if you have a team of people working together to create great products, the product manager had a lot of influence over what direction the team went and what problems the team decided to go after. And it's also really important because if you want there to be great products in the world that solve the kind of problems you care about, then you want there to be product managers like you in the world who care about the same problems that you do. So a lot of people ask me about, like, what's a typical day in the life of a product manager like? And it really varies over the course of the product life cycle. So you can see at the bottom, I've got I took the like the 5 Ds and we added another one for debrief here. But the way in many teams follow a life cycle sort of like this. So in the discovery phase is when you're trying to determine which problems are out there, which problems are important. So as a PM, you might be watching how they work all day, or you might be researching competitive problems. When you get to the definition stage, that's where you might be running analytical reports to sort of size different opportunities. On the design stage, you'll work hand in hand with your designer, reviewing the designs that come back and setting up goals and product principles that will help sort of add the constraints that you need for what success might look like. In development, you're working hand in hand with your engineers. You might be writing tickets, you might be answering questions as they come up, reviewing the product, using it all the time, no matter what your product is, whether it's a consumer product that you naturally would love to use, or if it's a business product, you find some way to test out the product. So, you might not be a truck driver, but if you're building software for truck drivers, you want to go in and go through it and sort of pretend to be one for a day and find ways to use your software and validate that it's working. At delivery, you work closely with marketing to come up with launch plans, decide how are things going to get out into the world. PMs might write the blog posts. And after everything's out in the world, there's the ever important debrief that takes you back to the beginning, where you analyze how your launch went, read customer feedback, and decide what to go after next. So I know a lot of people on this call are not product managers yet and are sort of wondering, would I enjoy being a product manager? So I sort of put together this slide, and this is especially, I think, useful for people who are considering product versus engineering, but it can be apply in other ways to sort of see, like, would this be a good role for me? So product managers create big impact by influencing other people, while software engineers and designers create their impact directly with their hands, creating things themselves. So that's one of the big trade-offs with product management is you can have a wider impact. You can influence the work of 5 or 10 engineers, but you give up that personal creation, and that can be a tough move for people. Another factor to consider is what kind of problems are you solving? So as a product manager, you're really going after solving problems for people. You're thinking about, how do we get these two teams to understand each other and prioritize across, the different problems. Whereas as an engineer, you're solving technical problems. Product management is filled with ambiguity and trade-offs. So when you're an engineer, you hit compile, and if it compiles, then you did it right. Whereas as a PM, especially the more senior you get, there is no right answer. You're really considering between two directions that either could be right, and it all just depends on what you value and how you're weighing the trade-offs. People saying, I want to be a product manager because I want to make all the decisions. And if that's what you're thinking and that's your interest in product management, then I think that you might be in for a sad surprise, is that as a product manager, you actually become more accountable to the people around you. And the product manager is the person who stands in front of, works with their designers and engineers to try to convince them that the approach they think is best, but also for executives and other product leadership and other stakeholders at the company. So as a PM, you're almost always having to explain your reasoning, deal with questioning from other people. And so if you love persuading other people, you might love being a product manager. Product management is lots of cross-functional collaboration, lots of meetings. And so if you really enjoy working with teams of people to get things done, you might love it. But if the idea of being in meetings half your day makes you cringe, then I would suggest that might not be a great job for you. And the last one is, I think, the relationship with perfection. So as a designer or engineer, you get a lot more space to take the time and make things perfect. Where as a product manager, you're constantly switching between different responsibilities that you have. And you're constantly taking a list of all the things you'd love to do, putting it in priority order, and knowing that you can only maybe get to the top half of that list. So as a PM, you spend a lot of time getting things to good enough and moving on so that you can handle more responsibilities. Because really, if a team had engineers and designers, they could build a product with no product managers, right? You're only there to help be a multiplier on the team. You're there to help the team build better products, more successful products, faster, more effectively, more efficiently. And so you don't really to be a useful member of the team, you need to take on a wide range of responsibilities. So I'm happy in the questions to talk more about becoming a product manager and what it's like, but I wanted to jump into some of the top lessons that I learned. So the first one is that the product manager should be the person who always starts with the goals. Whether you're building a product or hosting a meeting, really to take a step back and think, what am I trying to achieve with this? Why am I doing it? And to you, it's often very, very obvious. But if you ask that to people in the room, you might find that what was obvious to you wasn't obvious to everybody else. So as a PM, the place where our sort of sweet spot of where our work should happen is in defining the problems, the constraints, setting up frameworks, and defining what success looks like. And this becomes really important, not just because it creates great products, but because as a product manager, you're always short on time. And if you want to grow, you need to sort of obsolete yourself. You need to empower the people on your team so that they can make good decisions, even without you in the room. And that's that practice of setting up problems and frameworks so that people can come up with good decisions on their own is what frees up your time so that now you can work on bigger and better things. The next thing that's I think is really, really important for product management is validating your ideas. So what's kind of funny is if any of you have done a PM interview, on the interviews, you don't validate your ideas. On the interviews, you're told, design an alarm clock, and you just go in and you start designing it, and you just say whatever's on your mind, and you come up with your best ideas, and you assume that they're right. But the real world of product management is entirely different. Yes, you come up with ideas, but they could come from you or they could come from someone else on your team. And the thing that really differentiates, good, okay product managers and great product managers is that great product managers validate their ideas with real people quickly and early on in the process. So what this just means is double check the assumptions that you have, double check the thoughts that you have about what will be good or not. So really early on, you want to double check that people actually have the pain point that you have, and that maybe it is one of their top 3 pain points. Later on, you can just draw a sketch and show it to your roommate. So there are lots of ways to quickly validate ideas that don't take weeks. There are also ways that take weeks when you need that extra level of certainty. But one thing I would encourage anyone who's a product manager, and this can apply for any role you have, many people who aren't product managers fill a half product manager job. So maybe you're an engineer, but you're doing product, but you're also the one person who's filling that product role, who's thinking about the goals and the one who can go in and validate the ideas. Because the earlier you double check an idea, the cheaper it is and the less wasted time you spend. So if you go and build the entire feature and it turns out nobody wanted it and nobody can figure out how to use it, that's a lot of wasted time, whereas you could have found out much earlier. Next thing about product managers is something that I think also really differentiates product managers from people who wouldn't be great at the job, is product managers love products. And I think it's really important as a PM to study great products. So not just your own product and not just your competitors' products, but great products anywhere in the world. This could be great physical products. It could be great consumer products, business products. It can be physical products. It can be any apps that come out. And the reasons for this is that a lot of what comes up as creative solutions is just taking an idea from one domain and cross-applying it to another. So you don't have to just be born with creativity or the best ideas. What you need to do is to be able to recognize great ideas wherever they are. And so as an example of this, I've started really loving TikTok. And TikTok feels very new and very creative. It feels quite different than anything else I've used. But when I sort of decompose it into the parts, user-generated videos existed on YouTube for a long time. And this concept of scrolling through a feed and getting algorithmic content, and especially without even having to sign up or do any preferences, that existed on time. So in some ways, TikTok is sort of taking some of the good ideas from YouTube and some of the good ideas from Reddit, combining them and creating something that feels brand new because of the way that those two ideas interact. This one is my new charcuterie metaphor, which applies a little bit later on in your PM career. So a problem that people have all the time is they say, all right, my team is really going after growth features. We care about user growth, but shouldn't we spend a little bit of time on revenue? How are we going to decide whether it's better to go after this growth feature or this revenue feature? Or they'll say the engineers keep saying we need to invest in technical debt, but the technical debt isn't going to pay off for a long time. I don't know how to fit it in when I know all these new features are going to be so valuable. And when I think about it is you don't build a charcuterie board by deciding, taking all of the meats and cheeses and fruits and stack ranking them and deciding the top 10, because you might end up with a board that's all salami. And even if the salami is all better than, the fruits, that's not a really good charcuterie board. It needs to be well balanced. And so instead of taking these disparate goals and prioritizing them against each other, think about your roadmap like a charcuterie board and think about what percentage of your roadmap, of your portfolio, do you want to have going towards different goals. So for example, maybe you want to do 70% of your effort on things that are clear wins that your customers are asking for, and 30% of your effort on wild, big bets that have a chance to be a huge win, but have a chance to not be, but have a chance to fail. So when you think about it that way, the conversation at the portfolio level is often much easier to have in the abstract. And then you can stack rank within each group to be able to create a well-balanced portfolio. Now I wanted to move on to talking about product strategy, and roadmap is one of those parts of product strategy. So I've faced this experience that many PMs face, where at some point in your career, people say, you need to be more strategic. And I've even had a point where I wasn't sure what that meant, and I just tried to write a strategy, and I kind of figured it out, and people were like, okay, great, you're doing it. And then I got another point where somebody says, you have to write a strategy. And I said, I did write a strategy. And my boss said, that's not a strategy. So I was very confused, and we talked, and we had a maybe 45-minute conversation. And what I realized is that the word strategy and product strategy means different things to different people. But when I looked a level deeper, there were really 3 things it could mean. And maybe my manager was really thinking about a strategy as being a vision and a roadmap, and I thought of it as being a framework and a vision. But if you cover all 3 parts of these, when people talk about product strategy and being strategic as a PM, this is sort of what they're getting at. So product strategy is really about the opposite of strategy is tactics. So it's about not just looking at, what's the next incremental step we can take from where we are today to make the product a little bit better, but taking a step back and thinking about where do we want to go and how are we going to get there. So the first part is the product vision. And whatever team you're on, you can build a product vision. You don't need to be responsible for the whole product. You can create one for your team, or for what your team should work on next, or to combine the strategy that several launches have together. So the vision is setting a 2 to 3 years out. What would an ideal world look like? Imagine that you've built everything magically that you wanted to build. What does this future look like? And I like to think about this as an infomercial. So in infomercials, they always start with the pain. They're like, oh, it's so hard to open cans. And then they're like, but now with this new tool, I can open them on my own and I'm independent. So really thinking about so much better than the current state. And the idea behind this is it should be inspiring. Because once you have this vision, and it can be like a demo or like a little video, something that you walk through a prototype, you'll use that to inspire. Be like, don't you want to work on this? Don't you want to help me build this future together? You can also take it to your executives and be like, isn't this amazing? Won't this be great for the company? Don't you want to put more people on my team so that we can build this faster? And you can show it to customers and say, you like this? Is this something that you're be excited to get to? Will you pay for it when we get there? Would you use it when we get there? And that will help you validate that you're on the right track, as well as sometimes, keep customers with your company because they want to be staying with the company that has the good vision. So once you've got this inspiring vision, and you couldn't do these out of order, you can do these in any order you want. You've got this inspiring vision. The strategic framework is really getting down to the details of what are the strategic bets that you're making that you think will lead to winning a market, that will lead to success. So here, a lot of the times, what I like to drill into is who exactly is my target customer? So at Asana, one of the nuances that ended up being very important is sometimes we would build features where we were trying to win over people who didn't use any project management tool at all. So people who were just going back and forth in email. And that's a very different kind of target customer than if we're trying to win over somebody who does project management in a spreadsheet. And that's very different than if we're trying to win over someone who uses one of our competitors. So by narrowing in on which narrow slice of the market we thought we could win, that would have large repercussions on all of the product decisions we made and how we prioritized other work. And the third part is the roadmap. So some people don't like roadmaps. They say, we'll know what we're going to build when we get there. We don't want to commit ourselves upfront to something we haven't validated. And I totally agree that you shouldn't commit yourself upfront to something you haven't validated. But a strategic roadmap is not a commitment. It is a sketch of how you might get from here to there that helps you check if your plans are based in reality. So when you lay out what you'd have to build quarter by quarter, you might realize that the plan that you thought would take 2 years will actually take 10 years. And then you can make And then you can make the strategic decision about whether you want to put more people on the project so it can happen faster, or if you want to change the approach or change the goal you go after, because you might find out, for example, that your startup only has 2 years of runway, 2 years of money to keep existing. And so it won't work if it'll take you 5 years to get to your vision. So next one is investing in stakeholders. So I get a lot of questions about stakeholder management, and the approach for stakeholder management that I found works really well is to really invest in understanding your stakeholders. So when things go astray, it's usually because the PM doesn't really understand the goals of their stakeholder. They don't understand their constraints, and they don't understand their fears. So I recommend just having a conversation with the different people who are your stakeholders and try to meet at your common goals. So if you work at a company together, your company mission statement is something that you'll likely all have in common. But you can work from there and say, okay, we all agree, that we want to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. We all agree we're going to do that through scanning books. And now we're just having a disagreement on, like which of these two paths is going to be the best way to scan as many books as possible. So once you get to the place where you disagree, it's either going to be information, in which case you can share information with each other, or you might be making different assumptions, in which case you might be able to run a small, quick test to validate which of you is right. So if somebody thinks, that there's more books in English than in German, you can do a quick test and you can just go look up that data and you can try to validate that. Or the most tricky case is where you have a difference of values. So maybe one person thinks that it's okay to take some legal risk while scanning books, and another person thinks that it'd be worth it to go slower to avoid that risk. And when you come to a values difference, it's important to start figuring out who is the person who's responsible for making the strategic call on that value decision. Sometimes it'll be you, in which case you might have to sort of assert your position and say, I really appreciate it. I've heard all of your feedback. As the person responsible for this, I'm going to make the call that we should go forward with this. If anybody has a problem, we can escalate it, but this is a decision that's in my wheelhouse right now. Or it's not your decision. It really should be escalated. And this happens a lot of times where two stakeholders just can't agree. And it's because they need better strategic direction from the person above them, in which case you can bring the you've clarified the problem and clarified the values distinction, and you can bring that value distinction to the person who needs to explain the strategy. And that way you can all get on the same page. Next one I wanted to cover, we're close to the end now, and we'll get to Q&A soon, is that there are really 3 phases of a product manager role. And when you start off, you might only think about product management as being shipping product, and you want to get better and better and better at that, and that's important. But at some point, especially to make the leap into senior product management, you need to start working on product strategy, not just shipping great products that hit their goals, but also deciding which goals will be important to win the market. And as you continue to advance, once you move into people management, the role changes again. And there it really becomes about what I call organizational excellence. So as a manager or manager of managers, the main part of your job is to build a strong team. So your job is to build a strong team and enable them and empower them to ship great products and create great strategies. So a lot of the work here as a PM manager is hiring people and coaching them and setting up processes and working cross-functionally and working with the rest of the company to make sure that the company has the right strategy and context so that everyone on the product team can work as well as possible. And this, I think, is going to be my last one. Oh, I've got one offer. Is partnering with your manager on your career goals. So as a new PM, I didn't quite understand exactly how big of a role my manager played in my advancement. And so it's really critically important to build a strong relationship with your manager. Remember that they're only human. Think about the ways that you can help them achieve their goals, and that there'll be, just like as a PM, you want to empower your engineers. so that you can free up your time to work on bigger things. Your manager will want to empower you and hand over some strategic responsibilities to you so they can focus on larger things. So look for those places where you can work well together, and talk to your manager about your goals. Ask them, I'd love to be a people manager someday. What would you recommend I focus on right now so that I can start growing and I'll be ready when an opportunity arises? So by sort of bring them onto your team, have them be working together with you to help you achieve your goals. Don't see them as your enemy. And lastly, I wanted to talk about some different paths to product management. So there are lots of different ways to become a product manager. I think some of the easiest ways are, if you are in school already, is to look for an internship. Any internship in product is really great. Another really common role is an internal transfer. So I think this is if you're currently at a company, somewhere related to product, people move from engineering to PM, from customer success to PM, from technical writing to PM. Just start looking around to ask, if there is a PM manager, ask them if you can start picking up some work and start doing that. And once you've done a few projects for them, see if you can do the transfer. Or if your company doesn't have any PMs, start doing product-like work and eventually ask your manager if you can get that title. And that is one of the most common ways to move into that transfer. One other really popular way that I'll mention is if you have a non-product role at a company that does product really well, so you can work with product managers, what you can do is try to absorb as much as you can about the product best practices at your current company. So like if you're an engineer at Google, talk to your PMs, learn how they do things. Google is sort of notorious for making it hard to move from engineer to PM within Google, but that exposure you get to how Google runs its best practices means that you'll be an incredibly valuable PM at a smaller company who doesn't know all of these best practices. So you're able to sort of make that move because even though you weren't a PM before, you saw how it was done at a place that does it really well. Yeah, and with that, we can go into questions, Q&A. And if you do end up getting the book and love it, Amazon reviews, especially early on, are so helpful for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jackie. I think that was a really good presentation. That was lovely. Thanks to everyone who's asked questions. Go check Jackie, her profile online, her books, get the books for yourself, for your team as well. Really insightful all around regarding product management. So thanks to everyone who's attended. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. All the best with your book. You are shining a light in the PM field, and we love you for that. So keep doing it. Thank you so much. So be good, everyone. Stay safe. See you on the next one. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.